Hello, welcome to the 880 intro with Susan Fears.
Hi, I am really glad all of you could join us for our introduction to taking a look at the 880, and these are things that are going to help you how to work and how to set up your workspace. We're going to talk a little bit about how the screen is laid out because these are all the things that help you get your project set up before you get started. So working from the front of the machine, from the left to the right, you have your status bar on your left. That's that first black bar. We'll go in depth a little bit more about each of these icons, but just let's get a general overview. Next to that is your presser foot stitch realistic view, and this can be truly handy as you are trying out new stitches, putting in different needles, because you'll be able to see how it reacts with the foot or what the stitch is in relation to the foot. Then next over are your stitch categories, and these are tabs like file folders that group your practical stitches together, your decorative stitches together, your alphabets, your buttonholes, your quilt stitches, your personal program, which are your personal things that you save, and then your history stitches, which is record your last set of stitching that you have done. Then that last black column are your system settings, and these are some of the things that you will use as reference or as accessing setup so that you are able to program the machine to work the way you want it to for each project that you're working on. So if you take a look at the status bar where you have the where I have circled on that leftmost black bar, think about the order of these. You might be thinking, that's kind of how I thread the machine. And that is how they are arranged on your status bar. So the tension is first, the needle selection is second, then your presser foot, then your pressure, then what's the stitch plate, then the feed dogs, and the bobbin. So it's kind of like a top-down approach to the machine. Each of these can be changed, and you should think about changing these when you need to get the maximum and the best result with your sewing. There are also functions and buttons that live around the presser foot area. So you have buttons such as your automatic needle threader, your needle up and down, your presser foot up and down, your pattern end button, and your securing button. You also have a cutter, so anytime you're ready to activate the cut, you can get a scissor that's built into the machine to cut your top and bottom threads. We'll look at these a little bit closer because some of these are programmable. Also, you have a quick reverse button. On the other side, that's the oval button, and then above that is your start-stop button. So that is what you would activate for starting or stopping the machine when you are stitching without the foot pedal or you're working in embroidery. And then the quick reverse button is how you would get a tie-off at the end of your stitch. A couple of other things to know about needle stop up or down is you have a needle drop button. So on the front of your machine you have the needle up down. That takes the needle to the next position. On screen you also have an icon with a needle and a line. When you touch on the screen, that needle will stay above the line or go below, which is your fabric. So that's how you program the needle to stop up or down in your project. So program it on screen, move it to the next position by accessing the button and the needle stop up or down. Also, there is not a button for pattern begin on the machines. There's not an external button and there's not an on-screen button. The only time you'll see the pattern begin icon is if you are sewing and you are not at pattern begin. So let's say you were auditioning a stitch for a project such as 1394 and you were stitching away and you loved it. It's exactly what you hoped it would be. Now you're ready to take it to your project. How do I get it to start at the beginning? Look at your screen. If you do not see the icon, you're already, it happened by chance that you're at pattern begin. Or if you see the icon, it means, you can reset back to the beginning by touching the icon on the screen, and it will move the needle position back to the beginning. So that is how pattern begin works. You also have a magnetic touch pin holder with your machine, and it can be placed next to that black area between your screen or between the stitch width and stitch length knobs and your bobbin winding space. There are two magnets hold it into place, and you'll be able to have it at your fingertips anytime you're ready to work with it. So let's take a look at the machine simulator to look exactly at some of those things in depth that I gave you a preview on from our slides just a minute ago. Changing your tension is just as easy as selecting the icon and moving the little slider. You can move it by sliding the slide. You can use the plus or minus. You can also use your knobs. To reset, touch the icon of the number and it returns back to its default value. You should not be afraid to adjust your tension. With so many different threads out there and so many different threads and bobbin thread scenarios, you may find you need to adjust the bobbin tension from time to the needle tension from time to get the result that you want with the thread that you are using, and that's okay. You should feel comfortable to do that. It's easy to access. It is always here. Next on our list is the needle security. So with this needle security, it allows me to select and tell the machine that I have a double needle on. And if I have a double needle on, well, I hope I have a plate big enough to accommodate that double needle. What else I can see is that as I look at the stitch, I can see what it looks like with that double needle. So that's where your realistic view of the presser foot and stitch really can be fun, because you can preview it before you even practice stitch. Anytime you have something changed in the needle area, you'll see it in yellow on the status bar. I'm going to set us right back to the needle. The other thing that you may be noticing is this needle with the ribbon around it. What is that? This is where you can record what needle you have installed in the machine. You can throw away your post-it notes, and you can remember what you have right here. So you can scroll to the page that has the needle that you need, and you can see there's a nice variety. Perhaps you're putting in a regular universal needle and you're sewing with a 80 or perhaps a 90. So you set this up, you select close, and you are finished out of the needle. So next time when you come back to the machine, you don't remember what's there, you go back to the needle, you open the needle minder, and here is your setting. You no longer have to read the very small print on the needle. Next on our list is the presser foot selection, and this is a great option here for any time you are wanting to tell the machine what foot you have on. The machine will make different recommendations for you based on what you are doing. But if you tell the machine that's what you have engaged, what you have attached, it will build in certain safety features for you, such as maybe regulating the speed at which the machine is working at, or does the needle thread or not need to be active if that particular foot is on. Right now I have a straight stitch selected, I have a zigzag stitch selected. If I look at my presser feet options, it's telling me my number 1C foot is a good choice, but all these other ones with stars are also good choices. So let's take a look at those filtered presser feet all together. So these are all the feet that would work with that particular stitch. Let's say that I want to use that stitch and I think it began with a 1. So it will show me all the different feet that begin with a 1 that would also work with this. And this might be another way that you want to access or work with your presser foot selection. When you select a foot, then you'll see it appear in yellow. Anytime that you want to clear it, you can just touch the same foot on the screen, or you can use the clear icon from your system settings. And then we'll just close this away for the time being. With the presser foot pressure, this allows you to adjust how heavy or how hard the foot is sitting on your fabric. And for really fluffy fabrics, you may not want it hitting so hard because of the decorative technique that you might be doing. Again, you can move the slider, you can adjust the knobs, you can use the plus or minus to reset, touch the box that's bounded by the yellow, and it goes back to the default. Next in line is the stitch plate. You'll notice that when the stitch plate menu comes up, it also shows your needles because these two are very closely tied together. So if I were working with my needle punch and I installed my needle punch stitch plate, it knows to recommend the punch plate. So here we go. I have a congruent set up on my machine, and now it would be easy for me to work with my setup. So I'm going to set this back. Then next on our list, this is your feed dogs. So right now they are up. If I manually touch that and they become yellow, it shows me that they are down. The 880 will automatically lower the feed dogs for any time you're going into embroidery. It will automatically raise them when you're coming back into sewing, and it will drop them when you're going to the Bernina stitch regulator. But this will be an indicator if what has happened has happened. The next thing that you'll see is the bobbin. This is a place where you will be able to see the bobbin status of what's going on with how much thread you have in your machine on the bobbin. If you are winding a bobbin and you put a bobbin on the spindle, your bobbin winding screen comes up giving you the basic details of how fast do you want to wind your bobbin. This is a if we are selecting 25%, 50%, or 100% winding of our bobbin. So you can set how full you want the bobbin to wind. You can manually wind the bobbin by depressing or accessing the manual key. Auto is how we typically wind a full bobbin. If you'd like a refresher for how to wind a bobbin, access the little movie, and it shows you how to thread for winding the bobbin and how to wind the bobbin. To activate bobbin winding, you'll want to touch the little play button here, and it will wind the bobbin according to the settings that you have selected. With a bobbin sitting on the spindle, you'll see the status bar has a little bobbin spinning with the yellow line indicating that you have a bobbin on the spindle and something either needs to happen or is happening. Down below here, the very next spot is your clock. So your clock is always visible because this is a permanent place on your machine. What you can do by touching this icon is to set the alarm. So if I want to set the alarm, I turn it on and then I set the time and perhaps a message as a reminder for what that alarm was for, because some projects really get our minds off of everything else that we are working on. So that is your status bar. This should be something that you should feel comfortable accessing and setting for the different creative projects that you want to do. Looking at our stitch categories, I briefly mentioned what these were already, but you have different screens that you can scroll to see additional stitches. These are your practical stitches. Next is our decorative stitches, and I can see that I have 2 pages of folders. If I want to see them all at one time, I will select the transition. The transition will show me all of the folders, at which time I can select my stitch right away. So here, this is another time where you get to see what the stitch is in relation to the presser foot, and it's also recommended that I put on foot number 40C, the sideways motion foot. So use the machine to help you learn the machine or to help you be successful in new projects that you try to work on. I can also transition with these individual stitches. So Menu 401 has lots of stitches, so if I am working with the transition, I can still see more stitches to select all at one time. Next in the list are my alphabets, and there are many alphabets to select from. And then there are the buttonholes, lots of buttonholes added for the 880, including some new buttonholes that only exist on the 880. Next in line is our quilt menu. There were beautiful stitches developed and added to the 880 that you will find and love to play with and integrate into your projects. Continuing on down the list, you'll have your personal program, and this is a place where you can put things into that you've created, individual stitches that you have created or made through perhaps maybe the Stitch Designer, or things that you can get things out of, so retrieving them and then throwing them away when you no longer need them. As you are sewing, the last 15 stitches that you sew are remembered on the screen. So those are a great way to re-access some of those stitches so that you don't have to keep reprogramming them each time that you are stitching. So those are the basics for working with some of our stitch categories. Let's take a look at our last column, that starts with home. And home is a great place to be because this is the opening to whether or not you're going to go into sewing or embroidery. If I select embroidery, and then I can continue on with my embroidery. Next down the list is my setup. So here I can set up things for sewing, for embroidery, for the hoop, personalize the machine, messages I want to know about, sounds I want to know about by hearing it, and then things about my machine. So if I want to create some of the things for sewing, there's things like overall machine tension, which I tend to not do much with, how fast the machine is going to stitch. I don't do much here either. But what I might be interested in doing is turning the knot off at the very beginning, because as you begin to sew, you have a knot. You can turn this off at the beginning. That's done here. You also can program the programmable buttons. So above the presser foot, you do have buttons that are programmable, or they're sort of a little bit to the side. So let's take a look at what each of these are. You have pattern end, and pattern end comes from the factory, defaulted to tie off, and it knots with knot formation, cut, and raise the presser foot. If you want to have traditional pattern end where you don't have any of these, well then you just turn this off. And now when you touch the button, then you will only go to the end of the pattern and the machine will stop. Now as I am looking at the top of this window, how do I get back to where I am and where am I? This tells me through my breadcrumb path that I am in the pattern end window. I am in the programmable buttons, and I'm in sewing settings. I want to go back to the programmable buttons, so I select the little breadcrumb of programmable buttons. My presser foot up and down, I can program how high I want the presser foot to raise and lower. My quick reverse button comes programmed from the factory as a quick reverse, so it just goes back some stitches as long as I'm holding it and then comes forward. But I can also program that to backstepping, and backstepping then means it's going to go backwards in whatever stitch I've just stitched. So it's a fantastic way for a decorative stitch that you might be wanting to tie off by stitching back over itself. The knot feature, what kind of knot do I want? Do I want a little knot in a single place, or do I want the little running stitches? And can I program the scissor? Yes. Maybe you want to program the scissor to have a tie off because you took it off of pattern end. So every time I press the scissor, I will also get a tie off. I can program which kind, and then it will cut. Then this last little programmable button is what I can do with with needle down. So this is the one that you've programmed on screen. If I have programmed my needle to stop down, I can program the machine to stop with the foot down, the foot halfway up, or all the way up. And this is what I like to set it for if I want it to hover. So when needle is stopping down, typically it's because I want to pivot. So the foot is automatically going to raise part of the way for me, and then I can very easily pivot. It's a fantastic time-saving feature, especially if you are not using your freehand system and or you're not using your foot control. So I'll go back to our sewing settings, and I'll look at a new place called the Programmable Foot Control. Your foot control has a picture of a needle up and down on it, which means if you use the heel of your foot on the lower portion of the foot control, you will move the needle to the next position, so either up or down. But you can also reprogram that so that if you heel down on the foot control, you can add to that a tie off, a cut, and raise the presser foot. So or any combination of these. What would you like the foot control to do when you tap it with your heel? Raise the needle, or tie off and cut, tie off, cut, and raise the presser foot. You just need to remember how you have the machine set for the different things that you do. So staying in setup, let's take a look at the embroidery. This is where I can set some of the attributes that are important to me in embroidery, such as turning off the knot feature, or programming the calibration. Calibration needs to be done every time you update the machine or anytime you bring home a new hoop so that it always knows what center is. The little person is a way for you to personalize the machine with your colors and textures of the screen. So maybe you like gray and you'd like to see maybe the little Swiss emblem. Maybe you'd like this plum and you'd like the little floral, or perhaps you like the blue and you like the mountain. So you have all of these options to select and to choose from and to play with. The close will close me out of this window as well as close me out of setup. But if I want to stay in setup, I'm going to continue using the little breadcrumbs up in the upper left-hand corner. The picture of the eye, these are the things I want to watch. Yes, I want to know when the thread isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. Yes, I want you to alert me when the bobbin doesn't seem to be producing a stitch. And yes, I want to know when there's some sort of bad tension going on in my sewing. To turn these off, you just touch them and the eye turns to a closed eye because it's not watching those anymore. A couple of places that you might want to have a sound for. Perhaps you want to program the sound for sewing. Anytime you're selecting a stitch, you want to hear an audible sound. Or you're selecting something from the information screen. Yes, I want to hear the sound. Or I want to hear the sound, or I don't want to hear the sound when I'm working with the BERNINA stitch regulator. The sound on the BERNINA stitch regulator lets you know that you are going either too fast or going too fast to make a good stitch. Then our last area is the machine. This is where you can set some of your regional settings, such as your language, how you want to control the light, your touch pen, and your screen. Perhaps you are selecting an icon and something else is being selected, so you need to reprogram the touch feature. You want to reset the machine back to factory. The little wrench gives you some places that you actually probably would come to from time to time. The update is a way for you to update the machine when there is a new firmware version. The little broom is cleaning the sewing machine, how to clean, oil, and adjust it. Just doing some basic cleaning the lint out, or how to clean the cutter, things that you will want to do to keep your cutter functioning well. How to oil the machine. There's a great little movie, a little animation for how to oil. And then your module. And you also have a place to set the clock. So in this clock setting, this is where you will set the time that displays on your status bar. You only see it here because it's probably something you will do once, and then you won't do it again. So when you access the status bar clock, that's the place that you'll set the alarm. So that takes care of our wrench areas, and then you do have an information area which gives you what version you are running on the machine, should you be curious if your machine has the latest update, and a few other things that you can take a look at. So that is basically our setup, and I can just completely close out of that by touching the X. Next down is the tutorials. So perhaps you want to remember about how do I thread for a double needle. Let's watch the little movie. And I can scroll to see additional. So just by touching the page, you can scroll and see more information. Following on down, you come to the Creative Consultant. And the Creative Consultant is a sewing thing, so I only see it when I am in sewing. You have different wovens that you can select from, different knits, furs, denim, toweling, lace things. So you pick any of these little pieces. You select what is your sewing application. Do you want to put a zipper in it? Do you want to add a buttonhole? And it gives you the recommendations for the needles, what foot you would need, and other advice. If you have a question about something, like you see an icon, you don't know what that is, let's select the question mark and touch the icon. This is called Fit to Screen. It means it will fit the screen to the pattern so that you can actually have a better view. Or let's say you don't remember what a certain stitch is. So it'll tell you what some of the stitches are. Next on the list is Echo. This will let you put the machine to sleep, let you leave, save some of your power, but technically stays on so that all of your settings are being saved in that sewing session that you may want to return to. Touch the Echo icon 1 second time to disengage the Echo and bring back your sewing screen. And then Clear is a way for you to, anytime you want to make adjustments or you've made multiple adjustments to a stitch and then you want to just clear everything all at one time, the Clear function will do that. So that's really, really quite handy. And that pretty much completes our tour of the 8 series machine, and I hope that it's been informational and has given you some ideas about what the machine can do and how you can set it up so that you can get the maximum benefit from the sewing that you are doing and the most success. Thanks very much and enjoy your 880.